How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Jose, aka TheNYCGeek, aka T&G, aka your Elden Lord, even the God Butcher's Elden Lord, if you could believe it, aka the guy who got to watch Thor: Love and Thunder on Thursday night. I didn't go with my wife this time. Instead, I went with some very dear and old friends of mine. I went with T&K from T&K Tries It, a YouTube channel I would definitely recommend, and the link will be down below. Please, please, please check them out. Show them some love and support, as well as our friend Rio Cash. Now, I've known them for the better part of like 14 years. We've gone to a lot of cons, we've cosplayed, we have different tastes in anime, movies, games. So actually, it was a perfect opportunity to see this film, which I had already, had set my expectations super low, and, see how others might feel. Because my wife's not a huge Marvel fan. She doesn't really like superhero stuff. She likes Doctor Strange. That's who she loves. If Doctor Strange's in it, she's set. She's like, I'm fine. But she's not very invested in the MCU. She doesn't really care about what happens in it, which ultimately has proven to be an incredibly wise decision, because after watching this atrocious movie, Disney's made it very clear that they also don't give a shit about what happens in the MCU. Now, I will say Chris Hemsworth, he had an interview prior to this movie's release, okay? And I want to make sure I quote him properly, all right? So I jotted it down here, what he said. And he said, and I quote, "It was Taika at his craziest. Taika normally is kind of an 11. So you can do the math there." He described it as like he'd been given the keys to the kingdom, and someone said, "Here, if a 7-year-old was making a movie, what would you do?" That's the end of the quote. And those are Chris Hemsworth's words, not mine. And that really sums it up, because this movie felt like it was written and directed by a child. Like, that's the best way to describe it. It feels like it was written and directed by a child who was not funny, who doesn't understand storytelling, who has no business writing anything. This movie was a chore. It was awful. And look, I watched it Thursday night, and I gave my thoughts fresh out of the movie over on T&K's channel. Again, T&K Tries It. Check them out. And I'm going to I'll put the link in the description below. Their review is going to be out soon. And you can see there all of our initial reactions having watched this movie. And I had thought to get home, and it was late because we hung out in the parking lot and we were just talking about it more and more. But I was going to get home and jot down my thoughts, put out the video. And instead I was like, no, let me sleep on it, because, and I have my notes. I have them here. I have my notes. But I was just so annoyed with this movie. I was just so already mad, and I was tired and cranky. I said, you know what? No, let me wake up refreshed. Let me stew on this. Let me think about it. And as I sat more and more on it, and I've detached myself from my initial fucking how disappointed, how enraged, and all this I was with this movie. I have thought up of a word that best describes my overall feelings for this movie. Again, there's many: disappointment, annoyed, just a lot of things. But there's one word that really kind of sticks to me, and it's also what summed up the audience's reaction to this film, where we were in. And that was just apathy. It was complete apathy. Like, I saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, okay? And those of you who have seen my review, you know how disappointed I was with that. But this movie, it's like, it just felt draining. The bar was already low, so it was hard to disappoint. It still did, but it just felt like it was draining to be there. I didn't chuckle, and God knows it felt like Taika Waititi's throwing fucking jokes at your face every few seconds. I didn't cheer. I just wanted this movie to end. And at least with Multiverse of Madness, there were moments where with Sam Raimi's, shot, his directing, you're like, oh, this is fucking cool. And you have, Benedict Cumberbatch and Elizabeth Olsen, their acting is just top notch. And not to say Chris Hemsworth's acting isn't great either. He's incredible. And so is Christian Bale. But it just, at least that movie had moments where you're like, oh, they treated some moments very disrespectfully. And as I always say, with the cameos of Professor X and Reed Richards and Black Bolt. But this movie just felt so fucking draining. And I just wanted it to end. And at first I thought it was me being, harsh and whatnot, and critical. And then I realized there was no one else in this full movie theater. The theater was full. No one was laughing. No one was cheering. There was no reaction from the audience. This was a 2-hour film and it was dead. It was fucking dead. And midway through the movie, I asked Rio and Kazuma, because I was sitting between them, and I asked them if they were noticing that too. And Kay says it in his review. He says it. He said it felt like the theater was empty. For fuck's sake, Rio fell asleep at one point in the movie, and Thor is his favorite character. Yeah, I was like, dude, like I looked over and I'm like, bro, you asleep? Like it was an unfunny mess full of awful dialogue, really bad dialogue. And it treated the titular character almost as poorly as I had feared it would be treated from what we saw in the trailer. And it absolutely wasted Christian Bale and Russell Crowe. And the most key part that I keep mentioning over and over, the villain was such a letdown. The villain is so important in any superhero movie, and Disney still cannot understand that. They can't wrap their brains past on this concept. It's like they had it with Thanos, and then they just don't know where to go with it. And there were a handful of shots of moments where they would make like a shot of like, because he has like a hood on sometimes, and they make like Gorr slinking from the shadows, and he's like pulling the hood, and it's like, yo, this looks cool. Like it looks like I said, I was like, yo, this is like an Elden Ring moment here. Like I'm seeing I'm ready for the health bar to appear, like shit, your boss time. But those shots were so few. They were like 3 shots of that. And because Taika Waititi is awful at writing, he even made Gorr a goofy ass Uncle Fester character at one point in the film that completely took away any mystery, any fear that they would have had this villain project, because he's pretty much doing a silly voice and a stupid fucking puppet thing with kids. And I'm not kidding, by the way, that is an actual scene that happens in the movie. It was like, oh, look at Lenny. I was like, what the fuck is going on in this movie? Like it just felt like so out of it just. Look, I'm gonna go into spoilers, okay? And because I want to better explain some of the complaints I have with this movie, and I have quite a few, but I will say this before I get into spoilers. This film accomplished something that no other MCU film has ever done, not even the Eternals. And that's still the worst film. It is entirely irrelevant. Entirely. You can have never watched this movie and you would miss nothing. It sets up not a damn thing in the MCU. It is so inconsequential. Even the Eternals, as bad as that movie was, at least they introduced the concept of the Celestials and Arishem. You don't have to bother with this movie. It's not worth your money. You don't owe Disney anything. They owe you. Okay? When you give them your hard-earned money, they owe you a good product worth your money. And this isn't it. Okay? Wait for this to come out on Disney Plus. Borrow a friend's password. Don't even fucking subscribe for it. I wouldn't fucking subscribe for this. There are other things that I would subscribe to Disney Plus for, not the MCU. Maybe the first 3 phases of the MCU, but not this garbage, not phase 4. Phase 4 has been an absolute, utter disappointment. It's been a travesty. It's a fucking tragedy and a failure. A lot of failure. It's cost them a lot of fucking money because a lot of their movies have flopped. So, but now that I've given my thoughts and a proper spoiler warning, I am going to get more into the plot. I'm not going to go scene by scene. And I'm just going to hit on important points or what this movie calls, calls a plot. I'm not going to go on fucking every little bit. I'm just going to try to go on the important points of the plot and why the only joke in this movie that actually lands is how much of a fucking joke this movie actually is. Anyway, the movie starts with Gorr's origin, okay? And I can tell you this is easily the best part of this movie. I'm not kidding, and I'm not being facetious about it. I'm not. Watching Gorr with his daughter, right? They're making their way through like this wasteland, and he's like holding her, and he's like begging the gods to help them, and watching him having to hold his daughter in his arms as she's dying of like dehydration and starvation, and having to bury her, and he's like sleeping by her grave. This is honestly, it truly is one of the most emotional scenes I've ever seen in the MCU, in the entirety of the MCU. It was so genuine, and Christian Bale and that little girl, like, it was so good. And it was so heart-wrenching to see that happen. And if this movie had kept this tone, if it had dealt with some of the serious issues in this movie with the gravitas that those scenes and those events deserve, this would have been a significantly different, and I think honestly a much higher movie, like probably not mid-tier, like close to top tier, if it had dealt with some of these moments with the gravitas that they deserve, like I said. But anyway, Gorr is close to death, and he's laying beside his daughter's grave, and he's like resigned to experience the same fate that she just suffered. And in the distance, he starts hearing like these voices call to him, and he looks up and he sees like an oasis, and this oasis that is now inhabited by the very god that he was praying to. I can't remember the name of the god, but this god is the douchiest god you could imagine being. Like he basically tells Gorr, like, I don't give a fuck about your people. And Gorr's like, dude, like, I'm here. I'm ready for my eternal reward. I'm the last one of your priests left. Everyone's dead. And the god's like, dude, I don't fucking care. He's like, fucking throws food at him. He's like, there's more. I'll find more people to worship me. And Gorr's like, you motherfucker. Like, he's like, are you fucking kidding me? And he explains to Gorr that the only reason he's even here on the planet is to celebrate that he just killed an enemy. I don't know if it's another god or some other being who possessed a cursed sword known as the Necro Sword. And then, like, he grabs Gorr because Gorr starts bad-mouthing him, which deservedly so. And he starts, killing Gorr. And then the sword, because I think if I remember correctly, it's like Gorr calls him a piece of shit because that's what he is. And the Necro Sword like starts to rise out of the ground next to Gorr, like it's like take me, use me. And Gorr grabs it, and he fucking kills his former deity, and now he sets off to kill all the gods, thus becoming the God Butcher. Okay, so that opening scene, just fucking fantastic, man. It was great. I honestly like the way that the sword was whispering to him, because you might not be able to see it in the light, but my wedding band is the One Ring. Maybe you can. Yeah, you can see it. See it? So my wedding band is the One Ring. You see the writing, and we have, the writing on it and whatnot. And it's cool because it gave me very much Lord of the Rings elements, like, hearing the voices from the One Ring. It was cool that they did that with the Necro Sword. I like that. I did enjoy that. Then we go to Thor, who has been adventuring with the Guardians of the Galaxy, who were honestly a wasted cameo. They're gone in like the first 15 minutes because Thor is too powerful to be with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And any of the battles that they're in, he trivializes them. And they find themselves, kind of like, Thor, we need you. And he's like facing the millionth fucking midlife existential crisis that he's faced in the MCU. Because I went back and I did rewatch Thor 1 and Thor 2. I didn't watch Thor Ragnarok. And it's like, it's dawning on me. I'm like, man, this motherfucker is always like trying to find himself. Like he's always fucking confused. As to, even in Endgame, he's like, I can't find myself. In Infinity War, he has to find a new hammer because he can only identify himself if he has a weapon. It's just he's always in this like midlife crisis. Anyway, he tells the Guardians like, dude, I'm done. I'm done with the fighting. I gotta go find myself. And they vamoose. The Guardians like, let's get the fuck out of here. Let's leave this sucker. And Thor goes to New Asgard to, I guess, get back in touch with his roots. And at the same time, we're seeing Jane Foster. She's returned. It's been a decade since we've seen Jane Foster, and she has breast cancer. I think it's breast cancer. I don't believe they specify what type of cancer it is in the movie, but I know in the comics it was breast cancer. And she wants a cure, obviously, because, you know, it's fucking cancer. And she starts remembering Mjolnir. She starts reading, like she finds, like she sees a book and she starts looking through it, and she remembers that the hammer will bestow strength, great health to its wielder. So she goes to New Asgard to find the broken pieces of Mjolnir, which reform themselves to find her worthy and turn into Thor. Which again, I have to fucking remind you, it is not a fucking title. It is his name. It's not a mantle. And it's just as bad as it was in the comics. Actually, it's fucking worse. Because in the comics, Jane looks like she is dying. She looks like she's suffering. Here, Natalie Portman has stage 4 cancer, has been through chemo sessions, and she looks fine. She's chipper. She's like, and this is before she even gains Mjolnir. So you don't get the weight of like her fucking circumstance because it's never presented properly. And I want to touch on this more, okay? I really want to touch on this point more because this is not the worst thing about this movie. It's one of them, absolutely. Jane Foster becoming Thor has always been a terrible decision. Always. In the comics, it makes no sense. I don't fucking care that, you know, that she has a terminal illness there, because that doesn't suddenly make you worthy of Mjolnir. Okay, it doesn't. I'm sorry. It doesn't. There are millions, billions of people worthier than Jane Foster. The people who risked their lives to fight Thanos in Infinity War or in Endgame, Okoye from Wakanda, Pepper Potts, Scott Lang, any of them are worthier than Jane Foster. And here's the thing. I tell this to people all the time, right? It does a disservice to characters when you do the mantle and torch passing thing. And people don't seem to understand. I don't get why you don't understand this. It is lazy. It is unoriginal. You are saying that this character only finds validation because of a previously established character. Okay? If you wanted to give Jane Foster powers, there are tons of ways to do that. Other ways. In fact, here's one. Okay? And this is not very well thought out, but here's one, and I think it's infinitely better than just fucking giving her Mjolnir, okay? Obviously, she is familiar with Norse mythology. She's very familiar with Norse mythology. Have her start looking through some Asgardian ruins on Earth. You know, looking through see if she could find some of their advanced science, anything that might help her with the treatment of her illness. And let her find a spear. I don't know. Call it the spear of Jotunheim, okay? The spear of Jotunheim. And she begins to do research on the spear, and it bestows on her the powers of eternal winter, okay? And she begins to call herself Scotty. Give her that, which for those that don't know who Scotty is the goddess in Norse mythology who is associated with winter, mountains, hunting, bow hunting. Like she's a fucking warrior goddess who like Thor and all of them were scared of. Make her that. And you can give her you can give Jane Foster a unique name, a unique set of powers, because we haven't seen cryomancy in the MCU. I mean, yes, you know, there's Iceman, but there's no guarantee we're going to get Iceman in the fucking MCU. So you could give her cryomancy. No, we don't really have that. That's cool. You give her own unique heroic identity, her own costume, and this way you don't have her piggybacking on Thor. And I'm just thinking this up. Marvel Studios and Marvel Comics has a wealth of fucking writers. You're telling me these fucking tools couldn't think of something better? Guys, it's fucking laziness. It's a disservice to the character associated with it. I could think that up like that. They could do something even more involved. And don't tell me that that's not better for Jane Foster, for any of these fucking characters that you're fucking just handing the torch down, that you sit down and give them the effort to make a character and origin for them instead of just being like, shit, we don't got anything to do with Jane Foster. You know what? Give her the hammer. She could be the new Thor. That's fucking awful, man. Anyway, Gorr attacks New Asgard for reasons that we don't know yet. They say why he attacks, and Thor finally sees Jane use Mjolnir, and we engage in a stupid fucking love triangle with Thor pining for Mjolnir, and his axe Stormbreaker is being jealous. I can't. It is as silly as it sounds. At one point, like Thor has to go like 2 times. He has to go to Stormbreaker. He's like, "Hey, Stormbreaker, what's happening, baby? What's going on?" It's like that fucking meme of the guy walking with the girl, and he looks back at the other girl. That's exactly what Taika was going for. Like, he must have just seen this picture now, and he's like, "Put that in the movie. That's what we're gonna do." It's just so fucking silly. It's so silly, and it beggars the question: if Mjolnir could have rebuilt itself at any fucking time, why didn't it do that in Infinity War? Why did Thor have to spend all that time building Stormbreaker? This movie is fucking dumb. And obviously there's the renewed tension between Thor, who is an absolute bumbling buffoon this entire movie, and Jane Foster, who honestly, they make her a bumbling buffoon too. So everyone's a fucking dope in this movie. I mean, she's a little bit more competent than him, but she doesn't like make him look like shit. It's not like directly she makes him look like garbage, which is good. That's nice. Gorr kidnaps some of the Asgardian children, and Thor, Jane Foster, and Valkyrie and Korg, they have to set off to get some help. Okay, they have to fight Gorr and his army, because he, with his sword, he is able to summon these weird CGI shadow constructs, and he's like, "Yo, we need some help. We need to get the other gods out there to help us kick Gorr's ass." And they set off to Omnipotence City, which I've always hated that name in the comics. But this is the planet where all the other gods live, and they need to convince Zeus, who leads Omnipotence City, to rally the gods behind Thor's cause. And it goes about as terribly as you expect from the trailer. They incapacitate Zeus, they steal his thunderbolt, and I have another gripe with this movie because I don't remember if I mentioned it on the trailer, when we saw the trailer or not. The flick scene. But it dawned on me when I was watching it. I was like, when Zeus flicks Thor's clothing off and he's butt naked. Now, when this happens, Jane goes, "Should we help?" And Valkyrie's like, "Nah, yeah, but not yet. Grape?" And she offers her a grape, and they just sit there watching, right? And they sit there watching Thor stripped down to nothing and objectified. But if this had happened to Jane Foster, if this had happened to Valkyrie, there would have been a fucking outrage. And don't fucking sit there and tell me that there wasn't a huge fucking double standard there. It's fucking glaring. So that was obnoxious as fuck. They leave the goddamn planet with the fucking Thunderbolt. They didn't even get the army. And I'm gonna gloss over a bunch of the stupid stuff that happens in this movie, because I'm not sitting here scene by scene talking about this. They find out the reason. I'm hitting the major story points. They find the reason that Gorr grabbed the kids was because he needed bait. He needs Stormbreaker so that he can get the Bifrost to get to the center of the universe where eternity resides. For those that don't know what eternity is an entity, okay? It's an abstract concept, but it's an actual entity in the Marvel universe. And it is beyond the gods, beyond the celestials. It embodies the Marvel universe itself. And in the MCU, eternity is a wishing well, because we are told that the first person who ever makes contact with eternity will have one wish granted to them. How does anyone know this? How does anyone know this? Because if no one has ever made contact with eternity, how the fuck does anybody know what will happen when you meet eternity? What if instead of him granting your wish, he takes a huge, colossal galaxy shit on your head? You don't fucking know. You don't know what eternity is gonna do. Maybe he's gonna fucking flick you in the dick. You don't know that because nobody's met fucking eternity. So how do they know that meeting him will have him grant your wish? And why the fuck is the embodiment of eternity, just fucking giving out wishes. What the fuck? It's just, this plot is so awful, and it just needs to fucking chug along. So they don't give it much thought, and they don't want you to give it much thought either. But it is bad. It's bad. They eventually have their big fight with Gorr and his army, right? His army of shadow constructs. But you might say, Jose, you just said Thor doesn't have an army. He didn't get the army from the gods. Didn't they need reinforcements to tackle Gorr? Well, don't worry, faithful viewer, because this trash movie has a very stupid answer for that. Because apparently Thor is able to imbue others with the power of Thor. Okay? He basically does what Shazam does at the end of his movie. He shares his power. All of a sudden, he is able to make all of the kids who were abducted into little Thorlings. So you get to become Thor. You get to become Thor. Jane Foster, you're already Thor, so you get to become Thor. Everybody gets to be fucking become Thor. I don't know why he didn't use this in Endgame. When they were fighting Thanos, it would have been real fucking helpful if he could just go zoom and give everybody fucking Thor powers. Tony Stark might still be alive. They might have been able to fucking kill. Why not do this when Wakanda was fighting all the aliens? It just, the more I talk about it, the more annoyed I'm getting with this fucking movie. And I'm trying to gloss over a lot of the stupidity because it is actually physically hurting me to talk about this movie. Oh, deep breaths. At the end, Jane Foster nobly sacrifices herself to destroy the Necro Sword, but Gorr makes it to eternity anyway. And you know what happens next? He doesn't make the wish that we were all expecting. Nope, he doesn't wish for all the gods of the universe to die. Instead, Thor is able to convince him to use his wish to bring his daughter back, and Thor adopts her as his own because Gorr dies. Because I keep fucking, there's so many Thor, Gorr, Korb, like the fuck. But Gorr dies because he was tied to the Necro Sword. So the Necro Sword being destroyed, he is slowly fading away, and he wishes to bring his daughter back. And this movie ends with like Thor adopting the little girl as his daughter, and they are love and thunder. He is thunder and she is love. And this movie was fucking bad. It's not as bad as The Eternal, thankfully, but it is one of the lowest tier MCU films out there. And I don't know how people are giving this a fucking a 7 or an 8. Dude, you're out of your fucking mind. I could see an average. Somebody saying this is an average. If someone's like, this is low to middle tier, okay, yeah, all right, fine. I could see it being an average. If someone's like, that's okay. I could see a 5 because that's what T&K gave it. They gave it a 5. And I'm like, you know what? As I got out of it, I'm not as thinking back on it, I'm getting angry again. But I'm like, okay, I could see a 3, 4, a 5. 5 being the highest, that it is average. But when you start getting to a 6, now you're saying it's above average. When you start getting to a 7, you're saying it's good. When you say it's 8, it's great. When 9 is an excellent and 10 is perfect, this is not a good or great film. It is not. It's not at all. And like I said, I've calmed down because I initially gave it like a 2 or something like that. And it's not a 2. It's like, to me, I think it's like a 3, maybe like a 3 or 4 at best. Because there's something, I will touch it towards the end of the review, that at times I was like, oh, thank God they didn't do this. Thank God they didn't do that. Like, I'll say one right now. There was a scene where they have the hammer and Jane is sitting by the hammer. And Thor is going towards it and he's looking at the hammer. And I looked at Rio and me and him looked at each other and we're like, dude, if they make it that Thor is no longer worthy to wield Mjolnir, but no, he actually he grabs it and he lifts it up very easily and he hands it to her. And I was like, oh, whew, thank God. Okay. They didn't fucking, because that would have been, whoa, that would have been a real slap in the face. But Taika Waititi to me is just not very talented. In my opinion, it's my opinion. I don't find him funny. Yes, his style of like directing and whatnot worked for Jojo Rabbit, where he takes a very serious topic and kind of tries to portray it as kiddish because it's being seen through the eyes of a child. But I've hated his other projects. I don't like his other projects. I don't like in the shadows or whatever it's called. I don't like Thor Ragnarok. And I could tolerate Thor Ragnarok. I can't tolerate this. This is worse than Thor Ragnarok. It is far worse than Thor Ragnarok. He directed that, but here he both wrote and directed this, and you can tell this dude is fucking clueless when it comes to humor because he takes the same gag and runs it into the ground over and over and over in this movie. It's like when you have an uncle who has like one fucking joke, right? And that's the only joke they have. And every time you see that uncle, they say that fucking joke. And you've been living with it for years now. You're like, dude, get some new material. And he doesn't give you a fucking breather between the jokes. He has no idea how to manage comedic timing. There is a scene here, okay, where Jane is laying in a hospital bed. The cancer has ravaged her body. Now she's like looking like she's withering away, and her body, like, I guess because her actually using Mjolnir is killing her, which makes no fucking sense, because why would she ever have to revert back to being regular Jane Foster? Not like there's a timer or a fucking cooldown on Mjolnir. But anyway, her and Thor are having a moment, and he is mourning the fact that he knows she's going to die soon. And it's another touching film in the scene. And then immediately, and I do mean within 30 seconds of that scene ending, we immediately have to throw a shitty joke with Valkyrie in. It just really underlines my probably biggest complaint with this film. My absolute biggest complaint in this film is that there are moments here where they could have had actual drama if the whole film wasn't treated as a constant gag delivery. It's refreshed. That's one of the things that I was refreshed to see was they showed fathers being portrayed in a positive light, which is rare for Hollywood nowadays. It was a comfort to see that they didn't use Valkyrie or Jane Foster to shit on Thor. Yes, he is a bumbling buffoon, but not because those other characters shat on him. They didn't do the Worf effect. For those that don't know what the Worf effect is, it's look it up on TV tropes. It's when you have a character and they introduce a new character, like you have an established character that's like a badass, right? Like Wolverine. And they have a new character come in and whoop that character's ass. And they do that just so that you could be like, oh, look, the new character, look how cool they are because they whooped this character's ass. And we know this character's a badass. They didn't do that, thankfully, in this film. I'm glad they didn't. I was very worried about that. And that's the thing with this movie is it could have been so much better than it actually was. There is a time and place for jokes, and Taika does not understand that. Imagine, and this is a good way to try to explain. Imagine an Infinity War. If you remember how people reacted to that, the end of it, when they are watching their beloved characters die, both the audience and the people in the movie. They're watching their beloved characters die and they're being turned to dust. And imagine if after every time someone turns to dust, you have Korb busting out a stupid joke. It's so fucking childish. And that is my biggest complaint, is that there were moments in this film that could have elevated it to easily being a 7. They could have made it a great film, but it is constantly bogged down by terrible dialogue, goddamn fucking plot holes and terrible decisions, shitty jokes that never fucking land. There are so many things that bog it down. Bad action too. The action is very, I tried to describe it. There's a lot of scenes in this movie, right, where the combat doesn't feel very personal at times. It feels very like detached, because it'll be like they throw an axe. So like I'm Thor, or this is Thor, and they throw the axe, or Jane throws the hammer, and then it skips from them and it shows the hammer hitting the character. And there's a lot of that, and you don't get a lot of like the nitty gritty of combat. You get a little bit towards where Gorr and Thor start to fight, but it's a lot of that kind of like long distance combat, which doesn't lend itself to much. But it's just such a wasted film. It's such a wasted film. And I am sure that this movie will make money. I'm sure it will, but I think that it will have another big second weekend drop off like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse did. And now it doesn't have, you know, a film like Top Gun on the horizon, but I don't think this film has legs. And I know it's not getting good word of mouth. And considering that it cost over $250 million to film this, and another 100 plus for marketing, it has to gross at least $700 million to just break even. And I legit don't know if it can make that, especially if it's banned in China and other markets. I think that we are seeing the final hurrah of the MCU movies. I think this and Wakanda Forever might be the last blockbusters that they have in their, in their tank, because I don't think Ant-Man and the Marvels are going to pull in eye-opening figures. People think, oh, but it's got Captain Marvel. It'll have Captain Marvel. Dude, Captain Marvel, the only reason Captain Marvel made any money was because they spent a ton of money marketing it, and it was bookended by the two most anticipated films in the entire MCU series. Infinity War, Endgame, Captain Marvel right in there. Right there. And they fucking were talking about how she's the strongest Avenger and the most powerful fucking character. That's the only reason why. The Marvels will not be a fucking huge hit. And at the end, Disney has no one to blame but themselves. I and many others have been saying that the tide is turning and that the media behemoth that is the MCU has been running out of steam for a while now. And this is likely one of those last movies running on those fumes. Now, this has been the NYC Geek. If you've enjoyed this content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Hit it right now. Hit it right now. Unless you're subscribed, then instead, consider hitting that like button, hit that like button, that share button, hit that freaking bell so you can know when another video goes live. Leave a comment down below. I love to engage and chat with all of you, and I do my best to respond to every single comment. Tell me, are you digging? Did you like this movie? If you did, why? Give me reasons, because there are people who will be like, I love this movie. All right, I try to give you reasons why I don't like this movie. Tell me why you enjoyed this movie. I like discourse. I like to talk to people and get your opinion. Like, why did you like it? Why did you enjoy this? Or if you hated it, why did you hate it? Also, please do make sure to check out T&K Tries It. The description will be down below there, my friends. I've known them for many, many years. I was talking about how I was looking through my Facebook, and we were just looking at some old cosplay photos of us. I was like, man, we're fucking old. But do make sure to give them a follow. Please check out their channel. Hit that subscribe button over there. And if you haven't had a chance, please check me out over on twitch.tv/TheNYCGeek, where I stream regularly on Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. This Friday will actually be my year of celebrating my year of streaming. So we will be having a stream anniversary over there on the 15th of July. There will be a lot of suffering and whatnot, because I'll be having sub goals with like hockey chips and whatnot. So we're going to have a good time over there. But if you haven't had a chance, check me out over there. And as always, follow me on that disgusting, filthy cesspool that is Twitter. It's gross out there. Fucking gross. And remember, please, very important nowadays for this to be told, your time is precious. I thank you for sharing that with me. I truly do. That is the most important thing you could share with me, and I thank you for that. Please, please, please stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll see you guys next time.